For oral answer, and the first question stands in the name of the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Social Development and Employment. Does she stand by all her answers to oral question number 2 on the 7th of September 2011?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, yes I do. However, the House might note that I did correct one figure late last night. But I particularly stand by my statement, and I quote, "We had a huge hole in funding that we had to find millions of dollars to fill."
The Honourable Annette King.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. In light of her answer yesterday that there was no official measure of child poverty in New Zealand, so therefore she could not comment on the accuracy of figures arising from various reports, has she considered using Child Poverty Action Group's figures? If not, why not?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, well, they take their information from Statistics New Zealand and also from the Household Income Survey via MSD. So it's not where they're getting the information from, it's how they're analysing it. And I think that some will find merits in it, but some will also find holes in that study as well.
The
Supplementary question.
King.
If the Child Poverty Action Group figures are not acceptable to the National Party in government, why were they acceptable and used by the Minister of Finance when in opposition as the measure for child poverty in New Zealand?
Mr. Speaker, I think the difference between that side of the House and this one is we're actually getting on with solutions, putting money into those children, making sure that they actually get the kind of services that they need. We're not actually debating whether there is a problem. I think the debate is actually how you fix it, and we're working on solutions, not measures.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Speaker, it was a relatively straightforward question as to why figures that were acceptable for use by a minister before he was a minister are now no longer acceptable to the government.
Well, order, the members just, of course, answered his own query under his point of order that the minister has no responsibility for anything that the Honourable Bill English may have said while he was a member of the opposition. And the Minister has no responsibility for that whatsoever. That's the risk of that kind of question. The Honourable Annette King.
Convenient. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. If the government is addressing child poverty as she claims and are, quote, putting millions and millions of dollars into those children, how is she measuring the effectiveness of the expenditure and how are the programs being evaluated?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
That's a good question, Mr. Speaker, and in many different ways, to be quite frank. So some of it's based on outcomes, some of it is based on the number of visits that, for example, families start, how they are actually dealing with those, and they're being evaluated as such through studies around that. We have CSRE that are actually doing a whole lot of the research on those sorts of programs. You also see organisations themselves that are, but Mr. Speaker, I'm the first to admit, as I did yesterday, that a whole lot of evaluating did not happen, particularly in the years that member was in government, and so we are trying to actually fill a hole there and fix it so that we know exactly what is working and what should be funded.
The Honourable Annette King.
Supplementary question. Why did she tell the House yesterday that she didn't have all the facts about growing up in New Zealand longitudinal study because the question had not been set down as a primary one, but she managed to tell reporters on the way into the House how much money was being spent and that she'd told the university to seek funding from philanthropic sources to continue their work?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, I did not probably have the figure that the member was seeking yesterday in front of me, and as such was open about that. And on the slight error that we made on one of the figures, I came back in and corrected that. The member would like to explore it further, then let's go.
The Honourable Annette King.
Well, does the Minister have the information today? Will MSD cease funding the Growing Up in New Zealand longitudinal study as has been reported?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, what we've actually got here is a study that was launched in 2008 by Labour. Actually, it was not fully funded. It was not fully funded in the years that we launched it, let alone the following up.
Order. This particular question was a very straightforward question, and where straightforward questions are asked, I believe the House deserves them to be treated with a little more respect in that. And the question was very simple. It asked whether or not MSD would be continuing to fund this particular study or not as having been reported. Now, there was no attack on the Minister or anything like that. It was just asking whether this funding will be continued. Now, no decision might have been made yet, who knows, but to climb into to talk about the history a little bit is okay, but so long as we do get an answer to the question. The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, in actual fact, no funding decisions have been made for the 2012 budget. What I will say is actually the university funded that Labor launched has a shortfall of $97 million over the next 25 years, and I'm sure that Labor might like to go out there and promise that sort of funding, but actually this side of the House will be taking it as it comes.
Mr Speaker, what knowledge does she have of longitudinal studies, particularly this one, something that she called some kind of a study yesterday, and why is she demanding they show the merits of their work 2 years into a study but that has to last many years before you get the results?
Mr Speaker, let's deal with the actual facts of the situation. Labor launched the study in 2008 with much fanfare without any idea or plan on how they would fund it. That longitudinal study is going to cost at least $113 million over the next 25 years, and that is not funded, has no idea how it was going to be funded. This side of the House has been trying to fund some of that shortfall, has put in $9.5 million to date since it has been in government, but we will take it from there.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor.
I seek leave to table a document which shows that the Labor government funded this program for the first 2 years, the first 2 budgets that were presented by Bill English.
Could the member indicate the document?
Obviously, sir, our budget.
Oh, no, we don't table budget documents in this House. Question number 2, Tim, point of order. I beg your pardon now, wherever I go, is it a point of order?
Yes.
Point of order, the Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I seek to actually table a document which is from the MSD Financial Ledger, which shows actually the longitudinal study Reconciliation Growing Up in New Zealand study that will actually show the actual funding that has gone in and the funding.
Leavers sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There's no objection. Point of order, the Honourable Annette.
I seek your guidance, Mr Speaker. You have listened to answers from the Minister over the last 2 days on the study where she has claimed the previous government did not put money in the budget for this at all. In fact, she has said that she had to go cap in hand to ministers soon after she became the minister to get the money. We've tried to table today our budget documents that show that that is incorrect, and I believe we ought to have the opportunity to do that.
Order. I hear the member's point. I can understand the point of grievance, but I believe perhaps we're in debating territory here, because what one would need to do, and this is why we don't table documents to make points, we table documents to provide information for the House, and they already have the budget information. And I'd be surprised if the Minister had said there was no budget for this study. I don't believe she said that. What I understand the Minister have said, as I understand the answers given, that after a certain point there was no funding for a longitudinal study. And longitudinal studies obviously go on for quite a while, and that was something that troubled her. But I don't believe obviously the member can follow that up, and if a minister in fact if the minister has said there was never any budget for it, very good material for a question in this House. Point of order, the Honourable.
Mr Speaker, could I ask you, when you have a moment, to re-look at the tape of the replies the minister gave to these questions yesterday, where she said exactly what I have just said?
Well, I'm very happy to do that, but the point I make to the member is that if in fact she believes the minister has given an incorrect answer, then to question the minister with a primary question along those lines is certainly going to flush that out, because a primary question is an issue of some formality, and if the minister does not make the position absolutely clear and correct following a primary question, the minister would be in some difficulty. And so rather than try and score political points, the question time is a chance to really test whether the minister has given accurate information, and that's an excellent opportunity to do that. Point of order, the Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table a document I wouldn't normally table. To be quite frank, it has been actually done by my office, which gives the timeline for funding of growing up in New Zealand, which might actually clarify some of those things that the opposition are talking about, because what they will discover is... Order.
The member described the document and does not go on to make argument from it. The member is seeking leave to have tabled a document prepared by her office on the timeline of growing up, the funding of growing up in New Zealand. Is there any objection to that? There is objection. Supplementary question, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
When she told the House that within weeks of getting the job, I was informed that we had to find money to keep the study going, I had to go to my colleagues cap in hand, was she cognisant of the fact that the Labour government in 2008-9 had funded that, in 2008-9 had funded the 2009-10 and 2010-11 years. So in fact had funded it 3 years out from the budget, and she didn't need to go urgently cap in hand at all.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, it's a shame that the member didn't let me table the document, because it would have explained this quite well. But so let's get clear on this. So yes, Labour had put some money in, which was actually $5.8 million in April 2008. Don't clap yet, guys, because you haven't quite got the full story, yeah? And then they had put some in the budget for the years 09-10 and 10-11. It was nowhere near enough. Within weeks of getting into this job, I was told that there was a $10 million shortfall in funding. There had been no funding plan by the previous government for a study that they had launched. I have found $9.5 million in the last 2 weeks to prop up a Labour study that they had initiated without funding as they went forward.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
When she said in answer to the last supplementary question that there was not enough put in for those 2 years, did she put more in for those 2 years, or are her budget figures accurate, which shows she put not another cent in for those years?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I invite the member to look at the document that I tabled, which actually shows how much we did put in. So let's be quite clear. So Labour had put in money of $4.75 million and 3.1 over those 2 years. National actually put in more. Just because there's not a budget line in with this actual money doesn't mean it doesn't come from through the policy advice appropriation. The member knows that. She was a minister at some stage, but because there isn't, you will see it in the financial ledger of what money was put in. This national government have put in over $9.5 million in the last 2 years. I stand by that. I will absolutely guarantee it.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Is she therefore saying that in the 2009-10 budgets and 2010-11 budgets, the Minister of Finance tabled documents signed off by her as to the amount of spending on the longitudinal study that were inaccurate?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, no. Actually, Labour have got it wrong on this case. So, yes, they put some money in. They put nowhere near enough to actually cover what had to happen for that longitudinal study. I have gone to my members. We've actually fronted up with some, and I think that's where they'll see it land.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Why did she not?
Order. The Honourable Trevor Mallard. Order. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Why did she not, when she got the extra money for this longitudinal study, show it in the budgets, the 2 budgets?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Look, the member was once a minister. He should know that actually line items change in the budget. I've absolutely presented documents that prove that that money was paid out to the longitudinal study. They themselves in a press release said yesterday that they have had actually $25.9 million. It's been 23.3. Of that, 13.8 million was from Labour's appropriations and 9.5 million was from National as we brought forward. Not all of that 9.5 million was from MSD, but I can guarantee it.
Question number 2, Tim McIndoe.